Okay, so all things considered, honestly, this NFL season hasn't been that unpredictable. Teams like the Lions, Chiefs, and Ravens have all been some of the NFL's best teams, and of course that happened, but on the other side of this, we have gotten so many just pure disappointing teams this season, and the New Orleans Saints, man, to me are in the saddest situation in the NFL outside of the Browns, but we don't talk about them. So let me take you back in time to the distant mythical month of September, and more specifically the first week of the NFL season, and the New Orleans Saints were considered, no questions asked, a top 10 team in the NFL, ranked comfortably over teams like the Packers, Ravens, and Vikings, and Derek Carr was legitimately the leading MVP candidate, and deservedly so. Through 2 weeks, Carr had 5 touchdowns and 9 incompletions, while averaging a disgusting 11.4 yards per attempt, leading the team to a total of 91 points in, once again, just 2 games. Now, everyone in the moment, if you can remember, was questioning the sustainability of this team, but nobody was that worried the Saints were just going to fall off a cliff. It was more of like they would plateau eventually, until the dominoes began to fall. Now, I'm going to get into injuries because that is a massive issue for the Saints. I can't deny that. They lost Eric McCoy, Ryan Ramczyk, Marshawn Lattimore was out for a while, Paulson Adebo's out for the year, Alvin Kamara's been playing through a broken hand and ribs. I don't know how he's walking still. Taysom Hill missed time, Derek Carr got hurt, Olave's had 4 concussions, and the injury that hurt the offense the most in the moment was Rashid Shaheed going down for the year, because he really had perfect chemistry with Derek Carr, and those two had the most lethal deep ball connection in the entire league. But here's the problem. NFL teams kind of figured out the Saints offense anyways. Now, yes, the Saints are so injured it's hilarious, but let's go back to that Eagles game in week 3, where it was set up to be a clash of 2 contending teams in the NFC, where the young phenom Clint Kubiak, the Saints offensive coordinator, who remember was just apparently the greatest coordinator in the NFL at the time and was already just going to be a head coach the next season, but instead the Eagles kind of clamped them. The Saints offense, especially in the early weeks, relied so heavily on Kamara and the play action that stemmed off of that, and the Eagles realized, hey, if we can make the Saints receivers beat us one-on-one and prioritize clogging outside running lanes and putting pressure on Carr, we should be good. And they were. The Saints had no idea what was happening versus the Eagles and got embarrassed in a game that they had about 18 chances to win. And although injuries have obviously killed them, I personally believe this team was due for some negative regression, even if they stayed completely healthy. But there's more reasons for that, though. Dennis Allen has been fired, and he was a terrible NFL coach. We know this, and we've been know this. As a Raiders fan, I watched him absolutely tear everything we had down to the ground, and hell, even recently versus the Panthers, and all year long, his clock management has been shit, and down there with maybe some of the worst in the entire NFL, but maybe that's because they are one of the worst teams in the NFL, because after that Cowboys win in week 2, all the way back in week 2, the Saints haven't won a football game. Now, you can keep blaming injuries, but come on, man. The Saints have had so many chances to win games, and great teams that are well coached persevere despite the injuries, and instead the Saints coaching staff just stood around and watched the team have one of the biggest collapses in NFL history. But this team just needs to blow it up. There's no way around it. They have nothing but old veterans mainly. Chase Young, Cam Jordan, Derek Carr, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger. These guys are doing nothing on a terrible team, so don't be surprised if the Saints completely blow this thing up, because it's a fucking embarrassment. And it really makes it so much worse that Saints fans are seeing Sean Payton becoming, once again, a great coach. It's a really unfortunate situation. But, you know, also with Dennis Allen's firing, we can look for the Saints to get rid of Derek Carr too. It's the end of that experiment already, and there's really no point for him to be on this team that has no chance of being good. Now, I don't think Derek Carr can elevate a good team to being a contender, but maybe some other team will buy into that myth still. Who knows?
Miami could really change their fortune spells with a win. Their last win in Buffalo came on Christmas Eve in 2016.
The Miami Dolphins are really in a tough situation. This was a team that last year was unstoppable at their best. Legitimately, if they stayed healthy, and when they were healthy in 2023, Tyreek Hill was the best wide receiver in football, on pace for the best receiver season ever. Tua was a top 8 quarterback, Waddle was a monster, and Mostert was one of the biggest surprises of the season. And in the offseason, they were expected to repeat the same success they had under Mike McDaniel on offense and on defense, completely healthy. This was a team that could easily fuck around and go on a Super Bowl run, and in week 1, it seemed like nothing was going to change. Trevor Lawrence was contained pretty well, and both Waddle and Tyreek went for over 100 yards apiece, but then week 2 came, and even before Tua went down, because he did get injured in that game with another concussion, he was making some horrendous throws, and even if he played the whole game, the Bills would have blown out Miami anyways, but Tua did get hurt, and this is where I'm going to criticize the Dolphins front office, because Tua is one of the most injury-prone quarterbacks of the last decade. Every time the motherfucker drops back and leaves the pocket or doesn't see a dude in his blindside spot or whatever, you fear for his life. So, knowing that, why did you decide to stick with Skylar Thompson as the backup, knowing he was one of the most inefficient quarterbacks in the entire NFL last season, down there with guys like Zach Wilson? So why not go get Justin Fields? Why not sign Joe Flacco? I don't understand. So then, when Tua inevitably went down, because of course he did, the entire Dolphins offense and season as a whole was cooked. From there, Miami was just going back and forth between Skylar Thompson, future Hall of Famer and Pro Bowl sensation Tyler Huntley, and Tim Boyle. Tim Boyle played football this year. And meanwhile, Mike McDaniel was effectively forced to allow all the creativity he had to just be drained from his cranium, as Miami became one of the heaviest run teams in the entire league, as Waddle and Tyreek stats suffered greatly as a result, along with my fantasy teams. And meanwhile, they were just racking up loss after loss after loss. They had a terrible loss to the Colts, where Tim Boyle threw it away on 4th down, but still, even with all the injuries, because it wasn't just Tua, A-Chain was banged up, Jalen Phillips got injured again, Javon Holland's been in and out, but even with all of that, I don't care. Versus the Cardinals with Tua back, Miami had a shot to revive their season, but they couldn't do it. Tua has played well since he's returned, but for me, a lot of the Dolphins' recent struggles lie on Mike McDaniel. Their game plan has still remained heavily on Devon A-Chain, which isn't the worst idea in the world, but in the last 2 weeks versus Arizona and Buffalo, the Dolphins are still running the ball way over the league expected rate, while Tua, who's usually a splash zone deep play merchant, has only been looking for a deep ball on 10% of his throws, and even scarier, attempting a splash zone throw, meaning anything in the middle of the field with room to run, on just 7% of his throws. So in a way, Mike McDaniel trying to hide Tua and maybe prioritizing his health or something is really hurting the team, and more specifically, Tyreek Hill the most. But when Tua has been forced to throw, like in the last few drives versus the Bills, we've seen glimpses of what the Dolphins offense can be because the pieces are still there. They were matching Buffalo blow for blow, but in the end it just didn't work out. But because of the Tua injury, this team's margin for error is 0, and they still haven't won a game with Tua under center since week 1. So at this point, they might as well just pack it up. There's no hope for this season, barring a absolutely cataclysmic collapse from the Bills. But don't forget about what team the Dolphins beat in week 1. The Jacksonville Jaguars were a team that in 2024 were proclaimed by Shad Khan, the owner, to be the best and most talented team in Jaguars history. They are not. This team is a smoking barrel of sludge and lard, and the Jags are probably the most interesting disappointment in the entire league. For the Dolphins and Saints, honestly, if I wanted to be a nice guy, I could just blame injuries 100% for their issues, and it wouldn't even be wildly out of the realm of possibility. But for the Jaguars, that's just not really the case. Like, sure, they lost Christian Kirk and have had lingering injuries in the secondary, and Foyesade Oluokun going down was huge too, but that doesn't explain how things have gotten this bad this quickly. The Jaguars defense is simply a bottom 3 defense in the NFL, and that's with Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines, or whatever the hell his name is now, being one of the best pass rush duos in the league. But from weeks 1 through 9, the Jaguars have allowed the most expected points added per dropback in the entire NFL. If you have a good passing offense, you are going right through the Jaguars, while also allowing the second most splash plays in the league. And this team just doesn't do anything right. They somehow consistently don't even get that much pressure despite the talent up front, while also covering nobody, and that's just the defense. Because on offense, Doug Peterson has been on a rampage. Trevor Lawrence and his offensive coordinator buddy Press Taylor, I guess, have since rebounded in the last few weeks, but the offense has still been inexplicably horrendous and disappointing. Hank Bigsby has been their best player on the offense, consistently. Tank Bigsby. Brian Thomas looks good when he's out there, but he's also been battling injuries. It's just like, the Jags have no consistency at all. One week they're locked in a scoring duel with Deshaun Watson and the Browns, and the next they're hanging a 40 piece on a bad Colts defense. So they can be functional, but they aren't good. Take the Philly game that just happened, for example. The Jags shouldn't have been in that game whatsoever, but based on pure luck, and Philly has their own problems with Nick Sirianni somehow potentially being a worse coach than Doug Peterson, but they had a real chance to steal the game, but Doug Peterson had other plans. And once again, do not forget that the Eagles missed a field goal and then got a PI call that gave the illusion that the Jags offense was going down the field, which they weren't, that then led to a Trevor Lawrence game-losing interception, which was a 50-50 ball to the third-string running back, Dearness Johnson. After the game as well, Doug Peterson reaffirmed this play call by saying this was Trevor's first read. So, in crunch time, not only did the Jags have piss-poor time management, but also thought their best player one-on-one mismatch was Dearness Johnson. Sick, man. Just great. And this was far from the worst coaching game that Doug Peterson has had all year, and I'm shocked he made it out of the London Trip alive. And if the Jags didn't beat an even worse Patriots team, I'm not sure Doug Peterson would have a job right now, but after the year, I'm still fully expecting Doug Peterson and GM Trent Baalke to get canned, because this new Trevor Lawrence era that once had MVP expectations has been nothing but pure frustration. But anyways, if you like this video, then subscribe, because I got a lot of videos on the channel just like this one. And if you did like this video, then watch this video I did a few weeks back on Josh McDaniels and his time with the Raiders. It's pretty good, trust me. And thanks to all my Patreons for pledging $1. It truly does mean a lot. But anyways, until next time.